I had to search long and hard to find a guest who doesn't play fantasy, doesn't gamble, and have social media. But I'll be joined by my buddy Dan on this episode of the Scho-Zone. All right, everybody, welcome to the Scho-Zone. I am your host, Ryan Schofield. I'm recording this from the Degen Sen. We're on a Wednesday afternoon. I'll actually be posting this one later on tonight. But everybody likes, share, some comments, subscribe, all that douchebag stuff that podcast hosts like myself say. And now that I just recorded with a female guest who is a very, very nice lady, so didn't use that introduction. But now we have Dan here. We don't spit on it. We don't lube it up. We just get right after it. Dan, welcome to the Scho-Zone. How are we doing today, buddy?
Pretty good. How are you doing?
Doing well. So again, as I've been kind of talking about that, we're going to go on a couple of hosts of topics. Dan and I will be discussing football, and we'll also be discussing some of the ills of social media. I have found that Dan is a blessing in disguise for many reasons throughout my life, but Dan is only the few people I can have a good sports conversation with these days, or he's a unicorn in the sense of that does not play fantasy football, that's what I'm aware of. Does not gamble on sports
2011.
and doesn't have social media. So you just watch games and just form your own opinions. What is that like?
It's enjoyable. I haven't played fantasy football since 2011. I was in a league at my job at the time. Didn't check my team once. Made it all the way to the championship against the 10-year-old son of one of my coworkers. And thankfully I didn't win because my coworkers were pretty pissed at me. But after that, I realized I'm just not that into it. And gambling's never really appealed to me. So, just enjoy watching it and, the entertainment of it.
Did I ruin gambling for you? Is that what happens?
You may have. Yeah, it may have been a factor.
Yeah, gotcha. So, we talked about recording this a while ago. Dan is a wonderful Buffalo Bills fan, as far as that there's many different subculture, different, demographics of the Bill. Maybe demographics is the wrong word, but different departments or groupings of the Bills Mafia on there. A lot of them are just over the top and crazy, but Dan is what I like to call a rational fan. He can speak rationally about them. And I've, over the years been able to discuss football, candidly with Dan. Is that one of my favorite parts about you is that I'm somebody that you are on record as telling me that I said in a bar once upon a time that I'm not sure about anybody in this draft, but if I was going to make my bet on it, I'd say Josh Allen has the best chance of being a star or something along those lines. And here we are, and Josh Allen is the guy. And, what are we thinking about? You had told me that you were worried about the Ravens, but you said that you thought that Josh was going to play well in this game. We're giving us contrast there. Were you amazed that the Bills were able to win that game without Josh Allen playing as the game that he needed to play, or that we thought he had to play?
Yeah, that's not how I saw it playing out. The defense did just enough, especially in the first half. Turnovers. They got away from what they normally do, which is just that base defense, not blitzing very much. They took some chances that paid off. Normally when they do that, it doesn't pay off. This defense just isn't built for that. But I think the fact that they were able to win that way is one element of the evolution of Josh Allen, because that the play that really epitomizes that is when he got stuffed.
I was going to bring that up.
Yeah, and you could see in his eyes he really wanted to pitch it back. And 2 years ago, he absolutely would have, but he didn't. They played it safe, and playing it safe has definitely bit them in the last few years in the playoffs at times. But this was the rare occasion where they really needed to just not mess it up in the second half there.
And everyone, it's one of those things of that one of the worst. I don't even know how to say this, but I completely disregarded that game that happened earlier in the season. Like, when now with the length of the NFL season, what they played in week 4 or something, and it's like, I'm going to take so much stock into that game where it's like, at that point, it's almost like the preseason of football and, just different teams. I mean, the Ravens, one of the things about the Ravens is that they had this knock for their defense wasn't that good. But if you look at who they played to open up the season, they did play against some good quarterbacks where it's like, yeah, you would probably do, poorly in that sense. But the big thing that killed me for the Bills in that game was that, and I don't know what to say about Josh on that, but in the first game, the Bills were getting back in that game. And then they called the worst trick play I've ever, or just such a low probability of ever going well. Like, if you want Josh Allen to throw a pass, why don't you just have him throw a pass kind of thing, And then that one spun that game out of control. But I really feel like the Bills did dodge one on that one of that. If I was the Ravens, and I feel like that there was almost that we need to prove Lamar. I mean, I doubt that this really happens, but as somebody who had a little bit of money on the Bills and just in general was kind of pulling for the Bills, which is a weird place for me to find myself, I was terrified of the idea of the Ravens running the ball every play.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you play that game 10 times, the Ravens may win 7 or 8 of them. Derrick Henry probably rushes for 100, 150 yards in most of those. They, again, just in the first half, I think it was about just doing just enough. They slowed them down, got them in a little bit of a hole. And in the second half, it was just about not messing it up. And that early season matchup really didn't have much bearing on it. I mean, you look at the last 4 years now, the Bills have beat the Chiefs and the Patriots or in the playoffs, but 2 of those years they can't get past them in the playoffs. And
yeah, they beat them in the regular season. They can't beat them in the playoffs.
Regular season, yeah. And I mean, like 2021, they stomped the Chiefs in the regular season. And then, you see what happens in the playoffs. So it's a long season. Teams evolve. The Bills hadn't made the Cooper trade at that point. They hadn't made some of the other adjustments that they needed to. That trick play call was really the one big blemish for Joe Brady this year. But it's good that it happened early in the season.
Which you bring up the Cooper trade. Was that even a good thing? Like, I honestly don't understand. Like, did he just get that old overnight, or is he he's a non-factor?
Yeah, it's hard to tell. I mean, if anything, the value he's provided is as a decoy and drawing attention away. I do think they're a better team with him on the field, even when he's not putting up numbers, because if you look at the games before he got there, these receivers just can't separate. You don't have to respect any of them. Shakir can get open over the middle and find the soft spots in those zones. But it's a lot harder for him to do that when you don't really have to respect anybody's speed.
Well, are you aware that Shakir had the second most yards after catch in the NFL this year?
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, granted that Jamar Chase was like 200 some odd yards ahead of him, but that's wild stuff. And it's funny with the Bills of that, I mean, I'm somebody who has the bias thing of that. I believe Josh Allen should be the MVP regardless of what, Lamar did. My biggest reason I'm having this is because I have that bet on him to win the MVP. If either of them gets it, I almost look at it as that, this could be a perfect, scenario of a split MVP. But I mean, I just do look at with the Bills of that, they really are the most complete team, I would say, as far as from a team aspect. That was a team win that's there. And the comparison I've kind of made of that, I look at this Bills roster and I kind of compare it to the 2011 Dallas Mavericks, of where Josh Allen is Dirk Nowitzki. He is your superstar, where it's in the grand scheme of things, do I think that Josh Allen is a top 10 quarterback in the history of the NFL? No. But do I think he's a top 20 type candidate? Yes. And that's kind of where I would put Dirk on the historic, spectrum of basketball, where it's this team of kind of veteran, but also role players, kind of the extent, guys who accept their role and do that one thing that they do very well. And then if just get us in this opportunity where Josh can take us home there kind of deal. It's going to feel like where, I also wonder if they had to, the way that they got ahead of the Ravens, it seemed like that they were just trying to shorten the game as much as possible because of that reason to keep them from running the ball. That was kind of the way they called that second half game plan. It may have been that we're going to bleed the clock as much as we can, so you guys don't want to take more time off the clock because when you're playing ahead of there, or also the idea of that they're probably going to have to go into the kitchen sink for the Chiefs. I think that once you built that lead there, you have more. I can't trust the Bills. It's almost like how with the Lions, I couldn't trust Dan Campbell for doing something stupid. With Josh being one game away, I still feel like there's that one more wild and crazy play or something that's going to happen there. I just don't know what you expect as one, but I believe that the Bills can beat the Chiefs. I mean, where are you feeling as a Bills fan this year? I know that you told me a while back the team that you were worried about the most was the Eagles on the other side of things. But are you expecting this to be them to finally be the time that they get it done in Arrowhead?
It feels like a coin flip. I really want to believe that this is the year they get it done. It's at this point, I got to see it to believe it. Gun to my head, I'd pick the Bills in this game. But I think these are two very evenly matched teams. And they're kind of similar in a lot of ways. They, don't have a lot of flash, don't have a lot of stars outside of the quarterback position. Kansas City's got the better defense. The Bills have the better offensive line. The weapons for each quarterback are pretty similar. It honestly just feels like a coin flip. The regular season just doesn't matter. The Bills won pretty convincingly earlier this year, but I don't see that having a lot of bearing on it because, I think Spags is going to have a lot of things that he's going to pull out of his bag that he's been saving for this game, and I just hope Joe Brady can do the same. That's one of the things I'm hoping for with Cooper is that, are they just holding on to 2 or 3 packages with him that they weren't going to pull out until they meet the Chiefs?
Well, it's always one of these things that Cooper had, and that's why I asked if he just got old overnight or something like that, because one of his monikers or the idea when we got going was that he's one of the best route runners of the NFL. Usually good route runners can get open. It's just kind of, what I would wonder. What I look about, this isn't just, me being playful, but we always have joked around about the tight end being such a dominant position in the NFL or such a contributing position. But I really do believe that this game is going to be decided at the tight end spot, where that was one of the things the Bills took advantage of in the first matchup, is that Kansas City does struggle with opposing tight ends. And when the Bills do have, that's what I want to say. What has happened to the tight end play from the Bills? I don't even know where, Kincaid and Knox seem to be not putting the effort or giving the contributions they're getting before. Really, it's Shakir and then just timely plays from everybody else there, where that's where I kind of look at the Bills as this ultimate kind of team, where this is just kind of, talking about where we are with both games left here. Is it just weird, or am I crazy saying this, but with Washington, are they the team with the least question marks in this round? Because I just asked myself with the Eagles, I'm like, I don't trust Jalen Hurts and I don't trust Nick Sirianni. With the Chiefs, I'm just still like, okay, everything has to be closer than it really needs to be, or everything is just still the fact that they have not blown a team away all season. I'm just kind of they're playing all of these coin flip style of games, and eventually, you just you can only you crap out eventually on that one. Where, we have seen the Bills be dominant at points and times, but it's ultimately there are the question marks there that we just talked about, is that it is Josh Allen and just the, what key contributions can we get here? Where, this is not one of the most talented Bills rosters of this run for the Super Bowl, but yet they're strangely the best team. But are they now going to be punching above their weight class there? Because again, I do believe that if they played against the Ravens 10 times, that yes, they probably don't win the majority of them. They just kind of had that perfect game as far as it's really of that, the total defining thing is that you have two Josh Allen's always played well in the postseason, but it just came down to what quarterback made the fewest mistakes. And, I don't think Lamar makes that play every game, but yet again, he does find a way to make that play in every postseason. I don't want to believe that his career is done, that he can never win one, but it's also getting to the point of that we keep seeing the same movie over and over again. I don't know where to come across on that one. Whereas with the Commanders, I'm like, Jaden Daniels is legitimately terrifying. It doesn't look like that offense is stoppable, and the Eagles had some injuries going on. So I don't know. Where are you kind of on the NFC side of things?
Yeah. The Commanders are intriguing. Daniels absolutely looks like the real deal. I think they're playing with house money at this point, getting this far. And yeah, I think the Eagles are kind of boom or bust. That roster is just so talented, and they can just wear you down with Saquon, and the defense can lock things down. But Hurts he's a bit of a wild card, and he's also injured.
Right. Took a ding as well too, and if you have to go to Kenny Pickett's,
Yeah, I mean, I think they could still win with if they had to go to Kenny Pickett. But yeah, I mean, I'd probably still pick the Eagles in that game just because historically, rookie quarterbacks, the farther they get into the playoffs, they hit a wall, and Jaden Daniels looks like he can he can break through that, but I'm going to bet on history every time.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing. Which this is becoming the unfortunate thing about football is that like it's just I hate the idea of that. And I'm famous for saying this with gambling. One of my things is that if you follow a streak, you can win a bunch of money. If you go against a streak, you can only win once. And we are reaching this dangerous point where if Matthew Stafford and Aaron Rodgers retire, the only quarterback in the NFL with a Super Bowl are, I mean, Joe Flacco's in and out of retirement, I guess. But that would make that the only Super Bowl winner out there is Patrick Mahomes. And it's like, okay, so does it just mean that nobody else is going to win? I mean, one thing I look at with Jaden Daniels is that, he doesn't have a lot of competition as far as who the best quarterback going forward in the NFC is. I mean, they could be on to something special in Washington, and that maybe this is just they arrived a year early. But I mean, the turnaround under which he is gone. I mean, the Commanders, they weren't just bad; they were epically bad last year, and then now the fact of that, they beat Tampa where they put this pressure on opposing teams where you can't make mistakes because they don't make mistakes. And that's, again, the reason that the Bills were able to beat the Ravens is because they didn't make mistakes in this game. But it's like, can I see Jalen Hurts making mistakes? Yes, I watched it last Sunday. I feel like that, if not for a blown assignment on Jalen Carter on that third down there, that the Rams were going to win that football game. And I mean, it's just the idea where with Hurts, I'm just always blown away of that. It's like they have this great offensive line. They have this great running back. They have this great wide receiver duo, and the quarterback is only throwing for 150 yards a game. I'm just saying, it blows my mind of that, Eagles fans, passionate group, love to defend him, but it just, it does, I question it constantly. And, I mean, with the Chiefs, this idea that they just might be rope-a-doping us. I mean, all of a sudden Kelsey, dust him out of the garage and, he's back to looking like I don't want to say he's looking like his normal self. He looks every bit as slow and decrepit, but yet he's running down the field, Is that, what element of the Chiefs scares you the most going into this game, I guess? Is it the defensive line? Is it, Mahomes maneuver to scramble? Is it that Kelsey's going to burn you? Where are your biggest concerns?
It's the defensive line and those linebackers. The Chiefs these last couple years have actually had a very good defense. But even in the years before that, when their defense, didn't rank that highly, they were a great playoff defense. And I think that's been one of the big differences between the Bills and the Chiefs these last, 5 years or so, is that, the Bills have this really stout regular season defense, and then they get shredded in the playoffs. And I think the Chiefs have been kind of the opposite. They can rush the passer from, a bunch of different angles. Chris Jones, I would take him over Ed Oliver any day. He just shows up. I mean, one of the most frustrating things about the Bills defense is that they've invested so much money in a guy like Ed Oliver, and he just looks non-existent for long stretches. And I don't remember ever watching a Chiefs game where, you didn't notice Chris Jones. So definitely the defensive line, because, the other, the kind of sneaky element for the Bills this season is this is the best offensive line Josh Allen has ever had.
I was going to say that they have kind of been going by the wayside of that, this is definitely the best that they've looked up front, and, him not having to take those hits and not having to, I mean, realistically, when he's scrambling, it's not because the pass blocking is broken down. It's because nobody's getting open.
Yeah, exactly. And,
if you're blocking for 3 seconds, then anything longer than that is just, you can't expect the offensive lineman to hold a defensive player in the NFL for longer than 3 seconds. Anything after that, it's still a pass block win rate, kind of thing.
Yeah, and if you had the offensive line from say 2 or 3 years ago with this group of receivers, this team would have been fighting for a playoff berth at best, because those receivers just don't separate. But the line has given Josh the time to find the open receiver. And then I think the other element is Joe Brady. I still think that the Bills wasted a year and a half of Josh Allen's prime with Ken Dorsey. And this is one of the biggest drawbacks of having a defensive-minded head coach, is that once you get that franchise quarterback, you're going to have a great offense, and your offensive coordinator is going to get hired away. And then you're spinning the roulette wheel, of promoting someone that's been on your staff that you like, or bringing in someone new. And that can work out great. Or you can end up with Ken Dorsey for a year and a half. I would suspect Brady is going to get hired away, if not this year, then the following year. And I just hope they have a plan in place to replace that, because that makes such a big difference. He knows how to scheme these mediocre receivers open.
Which, and this is, I kind of had this moment where it was funny that thankfully it was one of those things I didn't tweet out, but it was an observation. There was a third down that the Bills converted in the game where, Allen just dropped back to pass and found the open guy. And I was just like, there is something about that 6'5" pocket passer that just looks so much better, where we look at these quarterbacks right now, and there's the people that want to pretend that we're in the golden era of quarterbacks, which I just find to be completely erroneous. But when they bring up the ages of these top guys, and they're all people that their mobility gets them places, and they talk about they're all under 30 years old. And it's like, yeah, but that's the tool that makes them as dangerous as they are goes away. Starts eroding at the age of 30. And then you start turning into, I use Russell Wilson as the cautionary tale for the athletic quarterback, because the margin between it's this much of athletic ability that makes them be able to extend those play that much longer and do those amazing things. Where with the size that these guys have, Lamar and Hurts and Mahomes in that 6'2", 6'1" range, where it becomes a little different, where Allen, I could see transitioning with the right football mind and the right personnel around him into that traditional pocket passer type deal, kind of what Roethlisberger became towards the end of his career. I think that might be what he can kind of hold more. But, it is funny that I think that, this group of quarterbacks, we have made the NFL such a quarterback driven league, and I just don't think we have the quarterbacks to go forward with it, is where I that was just a random thought of mine I had. But do you kind of notice the quality of football going down, and because of the lack of viable quarterbacks in the league?
I don't know. I would lean toward no. I think some of this comes from the bias of the quarterbacks we grew up watching, because I remember the generations older than us back in the 2000s lamenting the same thing, that it wasn't the same as John Elway and Brett Favre and Aikman and Steve Young. So I think there's some generational bias there. It's just hard to make that comparison. I do think that there are different levels of functional mobility with quarterbacks. When you look at Josh Allen, this year is a good example of him being more restrained and using that to move around in the pocket and roll out when the pressure gets to him, and create that second chance at a play when the first chance breaks down, as opposed to the mobility and the running as a primary weapon. I think that's where it's harder to sustain. And I think you're right that Josh Allen is poised to transition into being more of a pocket passer that can use his mobility more strategically. Look at Aaron Rodgers in his prime with Green Bay. He would run for a first down here and there, but he was also just really nimble in the pocket and could create that second play that would have gone away with 9 out of 10 quarterbacks.
Yeah, I just kind of go for. I don't know. I'm that bitter old man that just doesn't see things being the way that they were. Because here's the idea of that. And he just was. They're voting for the Hall of Fame, and I don't know if he got elected or not. But there isn't I don't know who the Eli Manning level quarterback would be in this current NFL, but there are some guys that if I guess Jared Goff, I guess would be kind of maybe okay, can we really believe that this guy would win a Super Bowl, and kind of thing where it's I think that we had that even the middle of the road quarterback was more serviceable, more where it's maybe the guys that are on the high end are in a different category on there. But I think that the middle of the pack quarterback, we used to kind of almost look at Andy Dalton as your smack dab in the middle quarterback. Now, I don't think that the quality of quarterback we have now has that same ability anymore, is kind of where I'd go across. Because when football, at least is from my perspective watching, is that there are 32 teams in the NFL, and when there are two good quarterbacks playing, it can be still as good of a product, or it still be as good of a, as entertaining as possible. But there's only about 8 guys I feel like that are capable of playing at that level. And we're just constantly setting up the next batch of them for failure. I mean, where it's like, how many generational prospects can we have that are not generational prospects? When the idea that we are asking for results of these guys so quickly that we're never giving them properly the ability to develop into the better caliber of quarterback is kind of where I look at. Am I on my own on that one? Because again, I like your perspective on this one because you have not had your brain polluted by other people's opinions. I don't know if I look for reasons to be different or if this is actually something that is true. So that's why I'm curious to ask.
Yeah, there's probably something to that. I mean, there seems to be a pretty big gap between the haves and the have-nots at the quarterback position. And I think it's hard also just to know how much the way the game has changed factors into this. I mean, just the rules are so different than they were 15, 20 years ago. And I think that just really changes quarterback play in a lot of ways. I don't know. I mean, I think there are a lot of exciting quarterbacks in the league right now, and things could look very different in a few years. I think it's been somewhat distorted because of the dominance of Mahomes and just no one else really having a crack at it.
Well, and the thing with Mahomes is, again, I can't help but notice with this one is that the Josh Allen's, what he's doing is impressive because here the Bills were constantly waiting to have that guy. Tyrod Taylor was that perfect stopgap quarterback. I always felt like that, at least helped the Bills establish a culture, maybe not, wasn't bringing you there, but like the idea that they at least got over that hump and got into the playoffs, like that kind of built this culture of that until the Bills got into the playoffs, it was that jinx they had to get over on there. And where it is a little bit more of that, I think we're having this happen at the coaching level too, is that like, it is amazing for Mahomes that he did inherit a situation that was not, the Chiefs were a playoff team. They just needed that one thing to get them over the hump, where now we're seeing what the Chiefs look like of now being removed from now having to pay that quarterback on there. And that's why they're not doing it as quite as impressive. It is amazing that, the Josh Allen has been able to take that team to the next level. And that's kind of what the Jaden Daniels has been able to do as well too. And again, can't help but notice that these were guys who played a lot of games in college football. There is that, element of that. Maybe they have learned the position where now, I'm just laughing, we're going to see this next wave of quarterbacks coming out into this year's draft. And, there's going to be the one guy, Jalen Milroe from Alabama, where it's just going to be, he's going to be a measurable athlete, but not a guy who's played a lot of quarterback. I mean, Bo Nix for the Broncos, has a tremendous, from where he started the season to where he got to, ends up looking like a good thing. And then obviously meets his match against the Bills on there, but, had played like 60 games as a quarterback in college. Same with Jaden Daniels. And the idea that, we're looking at the Shedeur Sanders, the idea that Deion's protecting him from where he goes is that ultimately he's going to go to a bad team. Most quarterbacks go to bad teams. We set them up for failure. It just seems like it's where we're going. And that's what I kind of look as where we're getting the decline out of position. But again, could just be somebody who has my brain clouded by social media, which is kind of what I really want to talk to you about, because here's the irony of this is I'm somebody who does this podcast and promotes through on there. But Dan, you have been somebody that has been off of social media and kind of been advocating against it for a while. So I guess, just give me some thoughts and kind of, things that you have found over your time as far as the dangers of social media and how, where we're going at with that, or some of the things you've seen in your own experience of the effect it's had on people.
Yeah, so I kind of, steadily drifted away from social media. I have never used Instagram or TikTok or Snapchat. I got on Facebook in the early 2000s when it was just for college students, and then became a pretty regular Facebook user after it became something that just everybody had. But toward the end of the 2010s, I just kind of started getting sick of it. And I got to the point where I had literally unfollowed everybody that I was friends with, because, that was no value to me. Having this weird, like, voyeuristic view into these little snapshots of people's lives, or just portrayals of their lives, just started to feel weird to me. But I did like some of the updates from bands that I follow and things like that. So I kind of curated it into my own feed of things that were actually useful to me. And then I realized, I don't even really need that either. And so right around the time COVID started, I deactivated it and have been off it ever since. And yeah, I mean, I can say now, having done this experiment of like life with and without social media, that I do think life is better without it. My attention span is much better than it ever was. I just feel more in control of like how I see the world and how I think and, how I see myself. I think that's really just what it comes down to is, having done life both ways. I think this is ultimately better, even if there are things I'm missing out on.
So I guess like I would say, like, it's amazing how it's almost like I've been doing some podcasts earlier on settling around like addiction and stuff. And it's amazing how you can just find yourself in this world that you never knew how you got there kind of thing. So I know now like how things are different, what I do with my time, but like as a sports fan, I'm having a hard time imagining how you even consume sports without it. I guess I just need to know, you watch a football game, then what's your next step after that? Do you just go about your life? Like you're like, are you really raw dogging life that much? Like you just kind of like, go on to the next thing. Like, I guess like, do you read magazines? Do you listen to the rate? I mean, like where do you consume your knowledge, or where do you get your information? I guess is where I would go.
I read a lot of books. That's one thing that's changed since I stopped using social media and just stopped using my phone very much at all. And, when I started reading, regularly, and I mostly read nonfiction, I could read maybe like 4 or 5 pages at a time and then have to take a break just because I couldn't sustain it. And I found over time that like, my attention is something I can train, that those are like mental muscles that can be built up. So I read a lot of books, and I feel like that's really helped kind of expand my mind. And I just find it more fulfilling, more enjoyable than just kind of mindlessly scrolling through things. I do, I do things where I'm really just focusing on one thing at a time. Even sports. So yeah, I'm probably an outlier in this way, but I put my phone in the other room and don't look at it during most games because I want to be fully locked in. Especially like right now, watching Bills playoff games, it still feels surreal to me because I'm 37. So I grew up watching the drought Bills. And what's happening right now with this team that has a transcendent quarterback and has been a perennial contender, that's going to go away at some point. And so when I'm watching a Bills playoff game right now, I don't want to be distracted by anything. I want to be fully locked in and enjoying that and just kind of detaching from my phone, using it as a tool for things that are useful and setting it aside. Otherwise, it's just led to a more fulfilling life.
Well, and then also throwing in is that I'm somebody that, obviously, my past the gambler, but I've become like where it's like, I'm doing it to try to make money and nothing more. Like, where it's like, you do have this awful, like the people that play fantasy football is that all these people, they need the game to somehow be more to them. Like, or they need to get themselves involved in the game more. Like, where I'm trying to grind out a couple dollars. That's really what I'm trying to do. But there are people that need to have their involvement in it. And I mean, I guess it's just that like there are less people that watch the game as true fans, I guess, or that's almost like it's refreshing to hear. And it's almost sad to me, but I kind of like, I'm like, like, oh, you've almost got like the innocence of a child. Like, like I'm just in this for go team go kind of thing, which is like refreshing because everybody else, I mean, like, again, where you miss out on so many awful sports conversations that I consume on a daily basis that like I need to get away from because it's just like, I'm so much better not knowing what the average idiot thinks. Like, and I almost wonder if that's where like every opinion of yours is an original opinion. Like it's all just kind of like you consumed it. You've had time to reasonably think about it the way that it should be. And then, you speak and talk to me like, even when you mentioned of how you use your phone, like you're the one person that I send a text to and then I just kind of wait for the reply knowing that it could be 3 days from now. It could be 3 minutes. It could be 3 hours. But I'm like, I never read too much into if I don't get a reply back from Dan. But where there's other people that if I don't hear back from them, I'm like, what's wrong? Like kind of thing. But like ultimately, where I go on it that you're a make for a great conversation is that everything has been well thought out and is not an impulse reaction to something that you saw or heard. Kind of, it's just you form your own opinions, and that's very unique in 2025, which is scary. I guess I should say, because I mean, some of the discourse of this one where it's like, like it is, a new phenomenon I've kind of realized where I'm getting over sports in the sense of that this obsession with ring culture. Like it's one thing for Bills fans to be obsessed with the Bills winning a ring because they never got one. But it's another thing for you to say that Josh Allen does it because it's like this idea that if Josh Allen never wins a quarterback, that he wasn't a good quarterback. Like that's going to be the way that history is going to be remembered of that, like this idea that now a kid who never breathed, air on this earth while Dan Marino was playing quarterback, we'll just see that he didn't win a Super Bowl ring and assume that he wasn't good, and that's kind of like this way we've gone on to where it's like we just had the college football season end, and I'm not, I know that you were never as huge on the college football as us, but like the idea that like there used to be something nice out of being one of the top 10 teams in the country, and now it's like it's turned into the Ricky Bobby. If you ain't first, you're last.
Yeah, I think it's really just an all or nothing kind of thinking, and it's especially again these last few years where the Chiefs have won 3 of the Super Bowls in the last 5 years. It's there's that added pressure, and I mean, who knows? I don't know if the Bills are gonna win one when they have Josh Allen, but it does feel good knowing at the beginning of the season that like that's a possibility, because when the quarterback was J.P. Lossman or Ryan Fitzpatrick or Tyrod Taylor, I mean, that's you're not getting to the Super Bowl. That's out of the question.
I almost want to ask you about that though, because I remember my time living in Western New York at that one. Do you think it was more, I mean, like this is a weird question to ask, but do you think it was more fun being a Bills fan with no expectations or the weight of the world on you? Or like not that it's on you physically, but it's like, it's a little bit of a different experience as far as if, like when you like, I just remember the Bills beating the Patriots in the regular season once upon a time, that game they came back on them. And I'm like,
yep.
I've not seen the response to a playoff win have any level of euphoria that I've seen quite like that one. Or like when the Bills, it wasn't even them winning a game, but when Tyler Boyd catches the pass from Andy Dalton, which again, I always never understood why Andy Dalton was the one that received all the benefits from all of that one, when Tyler Boyd was the guy who caught a ball between 3 people and wasn't touched and ran 20 yards with it. But like, I remember being out and about during that, and like the level of, I've not seen other wins that meant as much, where it was like there was almost something better of having no hope, and now the letdown that has happened from having hope, I guess. Like,
I will take this over that any day. I'll take the risk of the disappointment, because again, just like the experience of watching all these Bills playoff games the last several years has been great, and the disappointment that comes along with that, 100% worth it, because the Bills beating the Patriots in 2011, and I think they took down the goalposts after that game, which was just ridiculous, because that was a team that I think ended up 6-10. It just felt kind of empty, and there've been all these periods of hope. The Bills went 4-0 in 2008 with Trent Edwards, and I just feel like there was this collective sense of like, yeah, this isn't going to last. Whereas now it's like, yeah, the Bills may lose to the Chiefs again in the playoffs, but they're going to be a Super Bowl contender as long as Josh Allen is healthy. There's no more searching. This is one of the reasons I don't really follow college football at all anymore, is I have no reason to be up on the quarterbacks that are going to be coming out in the draft, because the Bills are now freed from that eternal search. So short answer, yeah, no, I will take the risk of the disappointment over the intermittent cheap highs that come with being a bad team.
Well, and that's kind of where I guess I would go, is that the idea that's, Wes, when you have Josh Allen, you at least always have a chance. I mean, they've been in the thick of this. They've been mentioned. I mean, the betting markets have reflected it. And I guess that's where I kind of say is the difference of that is you can't win. I mean, Jaden Daniels is the one kind of exception, but like there is this accepted list of quarterbacks that unless you have one of these guys, you have no chance of winning a Super Bowl. Whereas there was some quarterbacks that won Super Bowls in the past 20 years. I mean, like, when it wasn't Brady and we had the Eli Mannings of the world, the Joe Flaccos, like the idea that, you didn't necessarily need to have the best quarterback to win a Super Bowl before. And now it's like, you're not even in like, it's not even in the realm of possibilities unless you have a certain guy. And yes, having that guy, but I mean, that's where I kind of feel that football has gone. And I get the quarterbacks are the star power that drives the league, but like, it's just that, it used to be, I feel like more team. And that's what I kind of like about the Bills is that, yes, their best player is their quarterback, but it is an actual football team, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, talent-wise, this is probably,
and it matches the identity of the city. I guess I would go on with where it's like, like that's one of the things about the Chiefs kind of don't match the city. Like I really look at it as that what before because having been to Kansas City with this is that the Chiefs fans are which Bills fans. They're the same fans, just one's more successful. They're both these small market teams that have these loyal followings, and then one of them just got their guy sooner than the other one. Is kind of how I look at that. But like now we're at the point though that the Kansas City Chiefs do not necessarily match the town. I mean, like Patrick Mahomes being this, because signing the contract that he does, Kelsey having the superstar girlfriend, like that's not Kansas City. Where like everything about the Bills of this underdog mentality and, like the idea, like, when Allen, spoke out at the end of the game saying, everyone said we're undersized on defense. Like we look at, Buffalo as a microcosm of that, they don't belong in this league or, the idea that, the Willis McGahee say it's one of the worst cities in the world. So it is nice that this team does match its aesthetic very well, or like, does match its, it all belongs there. It is a blue collar type of team, like in a community of football players, if you will.
Yeah, and that's that's fun to experience, and it can change, in a few years, especially with the Bills having a lot more cap flexibility in the next few years. They can load up on talent again, and it could flip. They could be, the hated team in a few years, and just going back to the whole, which is better, the previous era of being a Bills fan or the current. I think having them back to back is part of what makes this so enjoyable is that, Bills fans went without for the longest time when they backed into the playoffs in 2017. But it's amazing that in the 17 years before that, they didn't back into the playoffs once, because every team does that, once in a while.
It's funny that, but we had this with, the division, the NFC North this year, but the Music City Miracle was the last playoff game before the drought. And, when that started the drought, correct?
Yep.
I believe the Titans and the Bills had like 12 and 13 wins. And that was, that they were playing in that game. Like they were like, this like the Colts went 13-3, I think, or something like that. Ridiculous or whatever. Or the Colts were in their division. Yeah. The Colts were in the division at that point in time. That was back when they had the 3 teams or whatever. And the way that it fell is that you had these teams. Yeah, the Bills were always a bona fide team. And like, I was a Bills fan at that point in time. And I mean, like the idea that, during the era of then we're having the 4 Hall of Famers, that the cornerstones of the franchise. And then it was just overnight, bam, went to nothing, like that. I mean, they had the stint with Flutie and Johnson. And then after that, it was just like, no, this went from like straight to the bottom and then kind of to a laughing stock. Or there was that brief glimmer of hope with Drew Bledsoe, I guess. But then after Bledsoe into the Lossman led for some, a long, dark period of time. There wasn't like they got the 9-7 playoff game that they got blown out in or anything like that. It was just completely inept. And obviously it's better having the better team. I'm not, there's really with that, but like, it just seemed like that it was easier to get a thrill out of the Bills, where now it's like, again, if you don't win on like part of this ring culture thing where I said the Bills are on a different mission than other teams, like for a Commanders fan, if they lose in the NFC Championship game, they're going to look back at this as a good season.
Mm-hmm.
If the Bills lose in the AFC Championship game, it's going to be tough for them to look at this as a good season.
Yeah, that'll
they've gotten to the point that that's the standard. When that's such a bad place to be, that if you only win a ring, then that's the only way that you can, like I have this relief as a St. Louis Cardinals fan that they're not going to be good this year. Like it's actually going to be enjoyable watching a team develop versus a team that I know is not good enough to win anything.
Yeah,
or a
take
team
the
that
pressure off.
has the expectations. Because 2 years ago with the trades that they made, it was like, if they don't win a World Series, this is a giant waste, like.
Yeah, and to be honest, that's what I thought this season was going to be with the Bills. I thought they would go 9-8 and be a borderline playoff team, and if they did make it, probably get blown out in the wild card round. So yeah, it changes quickly. But I'll take the sting of the disappointment and the devastation of another loss to the Chiefs, or what would probably be even worse would be like losing on another wide right in the Super Bowl. But I'll take that. I'll take that all day, because from that that rock bottom feeling that could happen if they lose this week, or if they make it to the Super Bowl and lose, you're right back to contending the next year. Whereas in previous years, it's just like, okay, maybe they'll go 8-8 this year.
It's I'm just still laughing at that. I just know that in like about, let's see, Alan's been there in about like 10 years or so, there's going to be a high school football team that comes out of the Buffalo area where every player is named Joshua Allen, whatever their last name is. And if they get the Super Bowl there, that's really just it's funny at the point where I had my struggles with Bills Mafia, that, obviously they were just, this, like, there was a little period of time with Bills Mafia where they weren't in on the joke, kind of deal. I kind of felt like where, the rest of the world was kind of laughing at them, but, they have done their good things where I'm now at the point of that they've taken their lumps. Again, I grew up a Bills fan, and then I just, kind of lost my allegiances. And now I feel like it'd be terrible for me to jump on board and do this, but I am just curious to see what the content that's going to be created if the Bills win the Super Bowl. That's going to be like, there's going to be a day that you're probably going to want to get back on social media just to see some of the footage, or you're going to kind of be like a pseudo person. You're going to want to see the TikToks. You're going to want to see the stories. You're going to want to see the posts. I kind of want that for the city of Buffalo, just to kind of, finally once and for all put that away, and then see how they handle, like, there was the whole idea of that, like, there's a secret part, and someone once said this to me that I never understood. They said this about the Sabres, but they said it was true about the Bills. There's this idea that gamblers always subconsciously want to lose. And somebody said that subconsciously Buffalo sports fans don't want to win, because then I think that what becomes the mission at that point on, like, it wouldn't shock me if nobody cared about the Bills 5 years from now if they won the Super Bowl, because it's just like, we had that moment there in 2025. Or it turns the other way around where they become the Chiefs and they're this dynasty, like.
Yeah, I don't think there'll be any end of an appetite for that. I mean, look at the Patriots for 20 years. Their fans, never lost the appetite, and they became hated after. No one cared about Patriots fans in the 90s, and same with the Chiefs prior to Mahomes. And if the Bills do break through and win a Super Bowl or two, I fully expect the nation to turn at least somewhat on Bills fans, because it feels like right now they're like maybe the closest thing to America's team. If
certainly, as far as like the Cowboys, everyone says it ironically or kind of like tongue in cheek, like, oh, America's team. But yeah, no, it does feel like that the Bills have that extra, like, if you're on a neutral side, it feels like people will gravitate towards the Bills.
Yeah, because like everything you described earlier, the team reflects the city. It's a small market. It's a working class city, and they probably have the best shot at dethroning the Chiefs, and most of the country is going to be on board with that.
It is kind of one of those things of that, like, this is happening in baseball right now, where the Los Angeles Dodgers are spending money at a rate, or they are finding ways to make these business savvy moves where they're signing all kinds of players and they're becoming this evil empire, even though they've only won one championship. But like, it is this weird thing how we do need to have that team that we hate. And like, it's kind of funny for me is that I had no problems with the Chiefs. And now I actually do kind of, I am going to be watching football for them to lose. And it was kind of like that whole thing of that when the Patriots weren't in a Super Bowl, the ratings were always fell, where it's like, as much as everybody claimed they hate the Patriots, they couldn't help but watch to want them to lose. It's kind of like, I call this the Jersey Shore effect, where like that show Jersey Shore, everyone claimed that they hated and that these guys were making all of this money unjustly. And it's like, yes, but they're only making that money because you can't stop watching. Like, you know, like it is weird how we want people there to root against. Like as good as it would have been, a Lions Bills Super Bowl, I don't think would have been as watched as a Super Bowl that would have like the Eagles and the Chiefs, unfortunately, is probably the ratings draw because everyone hates the Eagles fans and everybody hates, you know, Mahomes' wife or the Taylor Swift angle like that. But yeah, people are just so consumed by it. And that's maybe part of the thing of maybe tying this together to social media is that it's amazing how people are so drawn to the things they hate.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think human beings have an innate tendency to think in terms of heroes and villains. And that has absolutely gotten amplified by social media. And it definitely applies to sports. The villain is probably more of a draw than anything in sports. And so to switch sports for a second here, I was kind of hoping that Trae Young in the NBA would pick up that kind of villain mantle after the Knicks Hawks.
Yes, I remember that.
Years
ago. Reggie Miller like experience, you know, where
because that series was so much fun, and he just feeds off of it, you know. And there's still some echoes of that, especially whenever the Hawks play in New York. And I think the NBA is great for that too, just because, you know, there's fewer players on the court, so there's more attention on a villain. And I don't know if we have that right now as much as in the past.
No, we don't have that, and I can kind of even extrapolate upon that, and then we'll probably wrap this up as like the way that we consume sports as a spectator has also gotten worse. Like and maybe that's why I think that sports have taken a step back is the crowd experience. Where now, again, people are there, and I'm no better than this myself. I mean, I spent the summer traveling around to ballparks or whatever like that, filming content in ballparks or like that. But it's like the ticket is not much as there to watch the game as it is to kind of like, you know, it's a status symbol thing, or you're almost, again, everyone's got their own angle for this, but like, you know, I did find myself where like there's certain players that I would want to film their at-bats to post for, you know, things on my channel, but I would at least try to get it where I wasn't watching it through my phone, like where I was actually watching it. And like, I just don't think fans are engaged as much where we have that direct vitriol or that relationship with the player through the game. It's kind of like you would rather get the video of the player running off the field than actually giving them your 2 cents or whatever. But yeah, no, I mean, like, and I feel like the things suffer from that because there is nothing like a player who is embracing the hate from, I mean, what ended up happening out of that result there? The Garden hated Trae Young, and what happened? Trae Young performed at a level that he has never performed at ever again. Like, you know, yeah. They work together, and that same with like the Reggie Miller, and there is that like friendly level of things, but now everything's gone over the top. And again, I blame Bills Mafia of that a little bit of that, you know, like when the dildo got thrown onto the field, that was kind of like, you know, and that was before the social media era. That was when it would kind of pop up on there. And I think now every fan base has to try to, they're playing into a character of themselves for the clicks and the likes or whatever. And that's what I felt like was happening with Bills fans. Like, don't get me wrong, crazy shit was probably happening with Bills Mafia in the 90s. We just didn't know about it.
Sure.
And then like, whereas I think what ended up happening is that when I went to my one Bills Monday Night Football game, it was the people used to go to a Bills game and something crazy may happen. I started picking up on the energy as I'm at a Bills game. I got to do something crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's definitely a fundamental difference between just experiencing something and knowing there's a camera on you, you know, knowing that you're documenting something. And yeah, I mean, like you described there, it sounds like you try to strike a balance there where, yeah, you want to get that shot of a player, but you also don't want to miss out on the experience. And it changes behavior for sure. If you want to do the craziest thing that's going to go viral, that's different than just the organic crazy stuff that, like you said, happened in the 90s with Bills Mafia.
Well, it's like, and like, this is the thing of that. One of the greatest aesthetics of sports that has been removed from sports. Remember the kickoff at the Super Bowl, being able to see all the flashes going off in the stands?
Mm-hmm.
Like that, Like, you know, that was always one of the greatest parts of like, all these highlights of iconic sports moments were kind of in the background, was you could see the series of flashes going off now. And now it's you to see a bunch of people like this. And again, I'm no better. I'm somebody that's, done these things, but it's like, it's we've lost everybody. We're detached from each other. We're detached from what's happening in front of us. But I don't know. That was just a random kind of thought there. Dan, I was good having you on for a chat. I'm rooting for the best for the Bills. I mean, I know that you do not want to play against the Eagles, but I guess I would say, how would you feel about the Bills against the Command? I mean, how do you feel do you think that if they clear the Chiefs, that the hardest part is done, or do you think that the challenge on the other side is going to be? I mean, do you feel like that you obviously, I know that you told me that you think the Eagles are the worst matchup for them, but how would you feel if the Bills had to play the Commanders, I guess?
I'd pick the Bills in that game. Just, again, going by history, Sean McDermott versus rookie quarterbacks, he pretty consistently gets the best of them. Bills, Eagles, I'm sure I could talk myself into into the Bills winning that game, but that's a much taller task.
Yes, well, we will see what this shall bring. Dan, it was a pleasure chatting, and I'll talk to you off air in just a moment. So thank you for coming in on here. And Dan does not have any social medias for you to follow on. He doesn't even have a last name. I'm not even sure if he's a real person. Actually, AI is getting to a very, very scary place for sure. But it was a pleasure chatting with a little buddy, and I'll talk to you off air in just a moment. All right. Well, we talked to a good Bills fan, and we're going to hope that the Mafia gets it done. And the idea that it's funny that I would talk about maybe the ills of social media is I'm going to promote this episode on social media, but that's just the mission I have as I go through life. So everybody, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. And we'll be on next time for the Scho-Zone.